Millionaire hears boy screaming, "My mum is inside the drum." But upon opening, everything changes. The noise cut through the air like a blade. Michael Anderson stopped mid-sentence, his pen hovering over the contracts being discussed at the mahogany table in his 20th floor office of the most expensive commercial building in New York. The screams came from somewhere below, penetrating even the soundproof windows of his room. "Mr. Anderson, you were saying about the clause," tried to continue the lawyer seated across from him, but Michael raised his hand asking for silence. They were desperate screams from a child, a high-pitched voice that tugged at the heart, even through 20 floors of concrete and glass. He walked over to the panoramic window that overlooked the back of the building, where a narrow alley separated his building from the next one. Down below, a small boy was running back and forth, frantically gesturing toward a large, rusty metal drum leaning against the wall. Even from a distance, Michael could see that the child was barefoot, his clothes torn and dirty. "My mom is in there! Please, someone help me! My mom is trapped!" The words reached Michael like distorted echoes, but the desperation was unmistakable. The 42-year-old businessman, known throughout New York for his coldness in business and his ability to make tough decisions without blinking, felt something strange stir in his chest. "Sir, should we call security?" asked his secretary Marcus, who had approached the window. Michael didn't answer immediately. His brown eyes remained fixed on the scene below. The boy had stopped running and was now kneeling beside the drum, beating his small fists against the metal, sobbing. The metallic sound echoed through the alley like a broken bell. For years, Michael had built a fortress around his heart. Since the accident that took his wife Emily and his 8-year-old son Jacob 5 years ago, he had taken refuge in work, in spreadsheets, in numbers that didn't lie and didn't cause pain. Human problems were for other people to solve. He paid his taxes, made his annual donations to charities, and kept his distance from any situation that could awaken the emotions he had buried along with his family. But something in those screams hit him in a way he couldn't explain. "Cancel the meeting," he said abruptly, surprising everyone in the room. "Sir?" The lawyer looked confusedly at the contracts spread on the table. "But we have to sign today, the deadline." "Cancel," repeated Michael, already heading for the door. "Reschedule for tomorrow." Marcus ran after him. "Mr. Anderson, where are you going?" Michael didn't answer. He was already in the elevator, pressing the ground floor button harder than necessary. As he descended, he tried to convince himself that he was doing the right thing. Maybe the child was really in danger. Maybe someone was trapped in the drum. Maybe it was his duty as a citizen to check. But deep down, a voice he had long silenced whispered that those screams had touched a wound he believed had healed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The October air in New York was heavy when Michael exited through the back door of the building. The alley smelled of garbage and dampness, a stark contrast to the air-conditioned, scented environment of his office. His Italian leather shoes made noise against the wet asphalt as he approached the boy. The child had stopped screaming and was now whispering to the drum, as if talking to someone on the other side. Michael could see better now. The boy appeared to be about 10 years old, with tan skin, messy, curly hair, and clothes that were once colorful, but now faded and torn. He wasn't wearing shoes, and his feet were dirty and cut. "Hi," Michael said softly, trying not to scare the child. The boy turned quickly, his eyes wide and frightened. He had dried tears on his face, and an expression of despair that made Michael painfully remember his own son. "Are you going to help me?" asked the boy, his voice hoarse from so much screaming. "My mother is in there. She went in and can't get out. I saw her go in." Michael looked at the barrel. It was large, made of dark green metal that was rusted at the edges. It looked old and had a lid that seemed welded, or at least very tightly closed. There was no normal way someone could have entered there. "How did she get in?" asked Michael, kneeling to be at the boy's eye level. "I don't know. I was sleeping, and when I woke up she was screaming from inside the barrel. She said she couldn't get out." The boy wiped his nose with his shirt sleeve. "Do you have a screwdriver or a hammer? I need to get her out of there." Michael examined the barrel more closely. The lid really seemed sealed, but there was something strange about the story. How could an adult have gotten in there, and why was there no noise coming from inside? "What's your name?" he asked the boy. "Ethan. Ethan Smith. And the lady in there is my mother, Grace." "Ethan, when was the last time you saw your mother outside?" The boy hesitated, his eyes filling with tears again. It's been a few days. But she's in there. I heard her calling my name." Michael felt a tightness in his chest. There was something deeply wrong there, and it wasn't just the barrel. The boy was clearly malnourished, and there were signs he had been on the streets for some time. His clothes were too dirty to have been just a few hours, and he had mentioned sleeping there. "Ethan, let's try to open the barrel, okay? But first, tell me where you live." "We lived... Ethan stopped, confused. "We lived in Mrs. Wilkins' house, but she said she couldn't anymore, that she didn't have money. My mother said she would find a new place for us." Michael felt a familiar pang of pain. A lost child, separated from family. Even though the situation was different, the emotions it stirred were the same as when he had lost Jacob. "Okay, Ethan, let's open the barrel. But you need to stay behind me, okay?" Michael looked around the alley for some tool. Not far away there were some iron bars thrown next to a dumpster. He picked up one that seemed sturdy and returned to Ethan. "Your mother, was she talking to you just now?" Ethan shook his head vigorously. "She stopped talking a while ago, but I know she's in there, I know." Carefully, Michael inserted the iron bar between the lid and the body of the barrel, looking for a gap where he could leverage. The metal was indeed rusty, but it didn't seem impossible to open. He began to apply force, trying not to think about what he might find inside. The metal groaned and began to give way. Ethan held onto Michael's arm, his eyes fixed on the barrel. "Be careful, Mom. We're going to get you out of there." With one last effort, Michael managed to lift the lid. The metal opened with a loud, echoing noise. The smell that came out of the barrel wasn't of decomposition or danger, but of dampness and mold. They both looked inside. The barrel was almost empty. At the bottom there was a very old and worn cloth doll, with a faded blue dress and frayed wool hair. Beside it, some wet and illegible papers, and nothing else. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, staring into the barrel as if he couldn't process what he was seeing. "Mum," he whispered, then louder, "Mom!" He tried to throw himself into the barrel, but Michael held him by the shoulders. "Ethan, there's no one in there." "Yes, there is. She's there. She is." The boy began to struggle, trying to break free from Michael's grip. "She was talking to me. She said she couldn't get out." Michael felt a deep pain seeing the boy's despair. It was a pain he knew well, the denial, the refusal to accept a reality too painful to process. He had gone through the same stages after the accident. "Ethan, listen to me," he said softly but firmly. "There's no one in the barrel, just a doll." "No, it's not a doll, it's my mom." Ethan was crying convulsively now. "She's small because... The boy stopped talking, confused. His young mind was trying to find an explanation for the inexplicable. Michael looked at the doll at the bottom of the barrel. It had features resembling a woman, long hair, a dress, even some painted facial features that were almost faded by time. For a child in shock and malnourished, was it possible that... "Ethan," he said gently, "when was the last time you ate anything?" The boy stopped crying for a moment, confused by the change of subject. "I don't remember. There's food at Mrs. Wilkins's house, but she said I can't go in anymore." "And water? When did you drink water?" Ethan pointed to a puddle of rainwater on the ground. Michael felt his stomach turn. The child was clearly dehydrated and hungry, which could explain the hallucinations. But there was something else. The wet papers in the barrel caught his attention. Carefully he removed them and tried to decipher what was written. The ink had spread with the moisture, but he could still see it was an adult's handwriting, probably a woman's. "Ethan, do you know how to read?" The boy shook his head. "My mom was teaching me, but these papers, were they in the barrel when your mom went in?" Ethan looked at the papers in Michael's hands. I think so. I don't know. It was all dark." Michael tried to decipher the smudged words. He could make out a few. Can't anymore. Forgive me. Better this way. A terrible suspicion began to form in his mind. He put the papers in his pocket and focused on Ethan. Ethan, let's get out of here. Are you hungry? Thirsty? The boy nodded timidly. But what about my mom? We'll take the doll too, said Michael, picking up the worn toy, and we'll look for your real mom. When he touched the doll, Michael noticed something that made his heart tighten even more. It smelled of cheap perfume, the kind a working woman might wear, and there was a small gold chain tied around the doll's neck, a small cross that looked real. Ethan calmed down a bit, seeing that Michael had taken the doll. She was wearing that when she went into the barrel, he murmured. Michael closed his eyes for a moment. The situation was becoming clearer and more painful by the minute. Grace hadn't been sucked into a barrel by some mysterious force. On the contrary, she had left her belongings there, the doll that was probably all Ethan had of his mother, along with a letter that Michael suspected contained a farewell message. Grace had abandoned her son. Come on, Ethan. Let's find a place where you can eat and rest. And then we'll look for my mum? Michael looked into the child's hopeful eyes and felt his heart break. He had spent 5 years convincing himself it was better not to get emotionally involved with anything or anyone, that it was safer to keep his distance from situations that might awaken his feelings. But there he was, holding the hand of a lost boy, promising to help find a mother who probably didn't want to be found. Yes, Ethan, we'll look for your mother later. As they walked through the alley toward the main street, Michael tried to process what was happening. In less than an hour, his perfectly organized and emotionally sterile life had been turned upside down by a child who believed his mother had been magically sucked into a trash bin. And the worst part was that Michael couldn't just hand Ethan over to the authorities and return to his air-conditioned office. Something in those desperate eyes had awakened a part of him he thought was permanently dormant. The doll he carried seemed to grow heavier with each step, as if carrying with it all the sadness and abandonment that Ethan couldn't yet fully comprehend. They reached the main street, where the flow of pedestrians and cars contrasted dramatically with the painful silence of the alley. Michael stopped, looking around. There was a hospital a few blocks away. Ethan needed immediate medical attention. He was clearly malnourished and possibly dehydrated. Ethan, are you afraid of doctors? The boy looked at him curiously. Why? I'm not sick. Michael smiled sadly. Ethan's innocence was both beautiful and heartbreaking. It's just to make sure you're okay. Then we can get something to eat. Will you stay with me? The question was asked with a simplicity that completely unsettled Michael. It was exactly the kind of question Jacob used to ask when he was scared or unsure. The same intonation, the same need for reassurance that he wouldn't be abandoned. Yes, I'll stay with you. As they walked toward the hospital, Michael noticed how Ethan always stayed very close to him, as if afraid he might disappear too. The boy held the doll tightly with one hand and kept the other always touching Michael's arm or hand. Mr. Ethan hesitated. What's your name? Michael. Michael Anderson. Mr. Michael, why did you help me? The other people didn't stop when I asked for help. The question hit Michael like a punch to the stomach. Why had he helped? Why had he abandoned an important meeting, gone down 20 floors, and gotten involved in a complete stranger child's situation? He didn't have a rational answer. He just knew that something in those cries had touched a part of himself he had tried to keep buried along with his family. Because you needed help, he replied simply. Ethan nodded, as if that were the most logical answer in the world. For him, perhaps it was. They arrived at St. Luke's Hospital, one of the best in downtown New York. Michael knew the place well. He had made significant donations to the pediatric wing after the accident, a way to channel his pain into something that could help other children, even though he could no longer help his own. The hospital reception was spacious and clean, smelling of disinfectant and fresh flowers. Ethan shrank beside Michael, clearly intimidated by the environment. Good afternoon, Michael said to the receptionist. This boy needs urgent medical attention. He's malnourished and possibly dehydrated. The woman looked at Ethan with a professional expression, but Michael could see the compassion in her eyes. "Of course, sir. Are you the child's father?" The question caught him off guard. "No, I found him on the street. The parents are not present at the moment." "I understand. I'll call the social worker along with the doctor. If you could wait." Michael nodded and headed with Ethan to the emergency waiting area. The boy settled into the chair beside him, still holding the doll. "Mr. Michael, will they be able to find my mother here?" Michael looked at the child, who stared back with a trust he didn't deserve. How to explain to a 10-year-old that his mother had probably abandoned him? How to break that last thread of hope that kept him going? "Ethan, when she got into the barrel, did she say anything to you?" Ethan thought for a moment. "She said she loved me, and that I should be a good boy, and that she would come back to get me." Michael closed his eyes. Grace had indeed left a message for her son, but probably not in the way Ethan interpreted. The boy, in his fragile state, had created a narrative where his mother was trapped and needed to be saved, rather than accepting that he had been abandoned. "Ethan Smith," called a nurse. Michael stood up along with Ethan. "Right here, champ." The doctor who attended to them was a middle-aged man, Dr. Henry, who examined Ethan with care and patience. Michael explained how he had found the boy and his suspicions about the child's health condition. "You're right," said Dr. Henry after the initial examination. "He's malnourished and dehydrated. It's not serious yet, but we need to admit him for at least a few days for monitoring and to restore his nutritional balance." "Can I stay with him?" The doctor looked surprised at Michael. "You're not related to the child?" "No, but he has no one else at the moment. I don't want him to be alone." Dr. Henry assessed Michael for a moment, then nodded. Of course, in fact, it would be very good for him to have a family presence during treatment. A family presence. Michael had stopped being a family presence for any child 5 years ago. But when Ethan reached out his small hand, searching for his as he was taken to the room, he couldn't refuse. The room was small but comfortable, with a hospital bed and an armchair beside it. Ethan was put on an IV and given some soup that he devoured, as if he hadn't eaten in days, which was probably true. "Is it good?" asked Michael, sitting in the armchair next to the bed. "Yes, it is. Thank you, Mr. Michael." Ethan hesitated. "Are you leaving now?" "I'm not going anywhere." Ethan smiled for the first time since Michael had met him. It was a beautiful smile that lit up the child's entire thin face and made Michael painfully remember how Jacob used to smile when he felt safe and loved. "Mr. Michael?" Ethan was fighting sleep but still held onto the doll. "When my mother gets out of the barrel, will she be happy that you took care of me?" Michael felt his eyes fill with tears, but managed to control his voice. "I'm sure she will, Ethan." When Ethan finally fell asleep, Michael quietly left the room and went into the hallway. He took out his phone and called Marcus. "Cancel all my appointments for the next few days," he said when his secretary answered. "Sir? But tomorrow we have the presentation for the Japanese investors." "Reschedule it. And Marcus, I need you to do some research for me. A woman named Grace Smith. Probably works as a housekeeper or in a similar field. Has a 10-year-old son named Ethan. I want to know where she is." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Mr. Anderson, may I ask why?" Michael looked through the window of the room, where Ethan was sleeping peacefully for the first time in who knows how many days. "It's personal, Marcus. Very personal." After hanging up, Michael leaned against the hallway wall and closed his eyes. In less than 6 hours, his life had completely changed. He had spent 5 years building walls around his heart, and now a 10-year-old boy had managed to tear them all down in a matter of minutes. But Michael knew that the hardest part was yet to come. At some point, he would have to tell Ethan the truth about his mother, and he would have to decide what to do when that moment came. The cloth doll he had left on the table next to Ethan's bed seemed to look at him with its faded, embroidered eyes, as if it knew all the painful secrets that Michael still had to uncover. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The next morning, Michael woke up in the uncomfortable hospital chair with a backache he hadn't felt in years. He hadn't slept well. He couldn't stop thinking about the wet papers stored in his suit pocket and what they might reveal about Grace's whereabouts. Ethan was already awake, quietly playing with the doll and talking to it in whispers. When he saw that Michael had woken up, he smiled timidly. "Good morning, Mr. Michael. Did you sleep here?" "Yes, I did. How are you feeling?" "Better. The nurse said I can have real breakfast today, not just that liquid stuff." Michael smiled. Ethan had more color in his face and seemed less fragile. A night of proper hydration and nutrition had made a visible difference. Dr. Henry entered the room accompanied by a woman around 50 years old who introduced herself as Teresa, the hospital's social worker. "Good morning, Ethan. How are you feeling?" asked the doctor, checking the chart. "Much better, doctor." "Great. Mr. Michael, can we talk outside for a moment?" Michael nodded and kissed Ethan's forehead. "I'll be right back, champ. You stay here playing with—" He hesitated, realizing he didn't know the doll's name. "Grace," Ethan said naturally. "Her name is Grace, just like my mother." Michael felt a tightness in his chest, but kept a neutral expression. "Stay here. Playing with Grace, then." In the hallway, Dr. Henry got straight to the point. "The blood test showed that Ethan was indeed malnourished, but there's nothing that good nutrition won't fix. Physically, he'll be fine." "And mentally?" asked Michael, already suspecting the answer. Teresa took over the conversation. "Ethan is in a state we call traumatic denial. It's common in children who have experienced abandonment or loss. They create alternative narratives to deal with a reality that is too painful to process. The story about the drum—" Exactly. Deep down, he knows he was abandoned, but his mind created an explanation that's easier to accept, that his mother is trapped somewhere and needs to be saved, rather than having chosen to leave. Michael swallowed hard. "And the papers I found, were you able to recover anything?" Dr. Henry nodded. "Our team managed to restore part of the text. It's a farewell letter. The mother explains that she can no longer care for him and believes he'll be better off without her." "Does she say where she is?" "It doesn't specify, but it mentions she's going far away and that he shouldn't try to look for her." Teresa leaned forward. "Mr. Michael, may I ask what your intentions are regarding Ethan? Because we'll need to make some decisions about his future." It was the question Michael had been avoiding since the night before. What did he intend to do? Return to his orderly life and hand Ethan over to the system? Or was there something more he could do? "I need some time to think. How long does Ethan need to stay hospitalized?" 2 or 3 more days, but after that, if there's no guardian, he'll go to a shelter." "Yes, and unfortunately, the city's public shelters are overcrowded. It's not the ideal environment for a child who's already been through trauma." Michael nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. "Can I stay with him until then? I mean, legally." Teresa smiled for the first time. "If you want to take temporary responsibility for him, I can start the paperwork for provisional custody. But I need to warn you, once you take on this responsibility, it won't be easy to back out. Ethan has already grown very attached to you." Michael looked through the hospital room window, where Ethan was talking animatedly to the doll, probably telling it about the doctors and nurses. The scene was both adorable and heartbreaking. "I'd like to try to find his mother first," said Michael, "before making any permanent decisions." "Of course, but remember, Mr. Anderson, sometimes finding isn't the same as reuniting." After the professionals left, Michael returned to the room. Ethan greeted him with the smile that was becoming familiar. "Mr. Anderson, Grace is worried about my mother. She wants to know when we're going to look for her." Michael sat on the edge of the bed. "Ethan, I will look for your mother, I promise. But meanwhile, you'll stay with me, okay?" "Really?" Ethan's eyes lit up. "Are we going to live in your house?" Michael hesitated. He hadn't even considered the practical aspects of having a child at home. His apartment was modern and minimalist, designed for bachelor living. There was nothing there suitable for a child. "For now, yes. But Ethan, I need to explain something about your mother. She's okay, right?" Worry returned to Ethan's face. "Did you find her?" "I haven't found her yet, but—" Michael stopped. How to break this child's heart? How to destroy the last hope she had? "But I'll keep looking." Ethan nodded confidently. "I knew you would find her. Grace said you're a good man." Michael looked at the ragged cloth doll. For an absurd moment, he almost thanked Grace for the confidence. The rest of the day passed in a strange but comforting routine. Michael cancelled more meetings, to Marcus's despair, and spent the hours by Ethan's side. They watched cartoons on the room television. Ethan drew with coloured pencils that a kind nurse had provided, and Michael found himself smiling for the first time in years. It was frightening how easily he had slipped into the caregiver role. When Ethan was thirsty, Michael was there with water. When the boy grew restless, Michael made up stories about the drawings he was making. When Ethan whimpered that he missed home, Michael distracted him with questions about his favourite cartoons or foods. It was as if a part of him that had been dormant since the accident had been reactivated, the part that instinctively knew how to care for a child, how to comfort them when they were sad, how to make them laugh when they were worried. When night fell, Ethan was visibly tired but fighting sleep. "Mr. Anderson, when I wake up tomorrow, will you still be here?" "I will." "And the day after too?" "That too." Ethan settled better in the bed, hugging the doll. "Grace is happy that you're taking care of us." Michael adjusted the boy's blanket. "And you, Ethan? Are you happy?" Ethan thought for a moment. "I was very sad without my mother, but now, with you here, I'm not so sad anymore. I'm still worried about her, but you make me feel safe." The simplicity and honesty of the answer completely unraveled Michael. Since the accident, he'd convinced himself that it was better to keep emotional distance from everything and everyone, that it was safer not to get attached, not to care, not to allow himself to love anyone again. But here was a child who had been abandoned by his own mother, trusting him completely, offering his affection without reservation, without fear of being rejected again. "Ethan," Raphael said softly, "you are a very special boy." "My mom always said that," murmured Ethan, almost asleep. "She said I was the most beautiful gift God had given her." Raphael felt a sudden, intense anger toward Grace. How could she have spoken those words to her son and then simply abandon him? How could she have broken the heart of such a pure and trusting child? When Ethan fell asleep, Raphael went out into the hallway again and called Marcus. "Did you get any information on Grace Smith?" "I got some leads, sir. There are records of a Grace Smith who worked as a housekeeper in some homes in the Upper East Side. The last employer remembers her, said she left the job about 3 weeks ago, claiming she needed to take care of personal matters." "And after that?" "After that, nothing. She simply disappeared." "But sir, there's one thing. The former employer mentioned that Grace was very nervous in the last few weeks. She said she had serious financial problems and didn't know how she was going to support her son." Raphael clenched his fists. "Anything else?" "The employer gave a phone number for a friend of Grace's, a woman named Mary who lives in Greenwich Village. She might know where Grace is. Send me the number. I'll call her tomorrow." After hanging up, Raphael stood still in the hospital corridor, watching the nighttime activity. Nurses hurried by, doctors checked charts, families waited for news of loved ones. He had spent 5 years avoiding places like hospitals, situations that could remind him of his own loss. But now he was there by choice, caring for a child who wasn't his, emotionally involved in a way he had sworn he would never allow again. And the scariest part was that he felt good doing it. That night, Raphael slept again in the hospital armchair, but this time it wasn't just because he didn't want to leave Ethan alone. It was because he couldn't imagine being anywhere else. In the morning, while Ethan was having breakfast, Raphael called Mary, Grace's friend. "Hello? Who's speaking?" "My name is Michael. I'm taking care of Grace's son, Ethan. I really need to find her." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Mary, are you there?" "I am. Look, sir, I don't know if I should say where Grace is." "Why not?" "Because she made me promise not to tell anyone. She said she didn't want anyone to find her." Raphael felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief because Grace was alive and apparently well. Sadness because it confirmed that she had really abandoned Ethan by choice. "Mary, Ethan is in the hospital. He was malnourished and dehydrated. He's been living on the streets since she left." "My God," Mary's voice trembled. "She said she had left him with a neighbor." "What neighbor?" "Mrs. Wilkins. She said Mrs. Wilkins was going to take care of him until she could get back on her feet." Raphael remembered Ethan mentioning Mrs. Wilkins, the woman who had said she couldn't take care of him anymore. "Mary, I need to talk to Grace. It's about Ethan's future. Look, sir, she's in Miami. She got a job with a family there, but she made me swear I wouldn't tell where she was. She's in Miami and abandoned her son in New York. She said it was temporary, that she would come back to get him when she got settled." Raphael closed his eyes. It was the same lie so many parents told themselves when they abandoned their children. The promise that it was only temporary, that they would return when things got better. "Mary, do you have the address where she is?" "I don't know if I can give it." "Mary, please. Look, I don't want to harm Grace. I just want her to make a definite decision about Ethan. He's suffering thinking she's trapped somewhere. He needs to know the truth." There was another silence. Then Mary sighed. "She's working at a house in South Beach. The employer's name is Silverman. But sir, please don't tell them I was the one who said it." "Thank you, Mary, thank you very much." When Michael returned to the room, Ethan was playing with colored pencils, making drawings. "What are you drawing, champ?" "It's you, me, and my mom," said Ethan, showing the drawing. "Look, here we are all three living in a big house with a garden. And here's a dog." Michael looked at the drawing. It was touching to see how Ethan had included all three of them in his fantasy of a perfect family. The man in a suit, who was clearly Michael, the woman in a blue dress, Grace, and himself in the middle, holding both their hands. "It's a very beautiful drawing, Ethan. When my mom gets out of the drum, can we live in a house like this?" Michael sat on the bed. It was time to start preparing Ethan for reality. "Ethan, I'm going to find your mother, but I need you to understand that sometimes people make difficult choices, and those choices aren't always what we want them to make." Ethan stopped coloring and looked at Michael seriously. "Do you think my mom doesn't want to live with me anymore?" The question broke Michael's heart. Ethan was more perceptive than he had imagined. "I don't know, Ethan, but I'll find out. And no matter what your mother decides, you won't be alone. Will you stay with me? If you want me to stay." Ethan put the pencils aside and threw himself into Michael's arms. "I do want you to, Mr. Anderson. Very much." Michael hugged the boy, feeling as if a missing piece in his life had finally fallen into place. It wasn't the same as having Jacob back, nothing ever would be. But it was something new, different, that filled a void he didn't even know still existed. "Then that's what we'll do," he murmured into Ethan's ear. "We'll take care of each other." But even as he made this promise, Michael knew there was still a difficult conversation ahead. He needed to confront Grace. He needed to understand why she had abandoned a boy as special as Ethan, and he needed to give her the chance to explain her actions, even though he already knew he probably wouldn't like the answers he would get. The cloth doll remained on Ethan's lap, seemingly watching the whole scene with its faded, embroidered eyes. Michael wondered what stories it could tell, if it could speak. How many nights had it comforted Ethan when he cried for his mother? How many one-sided conversations had it heard about fears and hopes? Dr. Henry entered the room to perform the final checkup before discharge. "How's our champion today?" "I'm fine, doctor. Can I go home now?" "Yes, you can. Your tests are all normal now." The doctor addressed Michael. "He can be discharged today if you wish." Michael nodded. "Then let's go home, Ethan." Ethan jumped excitedly from the bed. "Really? And will we be able to look for my mom?" "Yes, we will. But first, how about we see the house where you'll be staying?" As they packed Ethan's few things, the doll, the drawings he had made, and some colored pencils the nurses let him take, Michael thought about how his life had changed in just 3 days. 3 days ago, he was a successful businessman, emotionally closed off, who had built a life of isolation after losing his family. Now he was about to take home a traumatized and abandoned child, taking on a responsibility he hadn't planned for, and that deeply frightened him. But seeing the joy on Ethan's face as he carefully packed his drawings, Michael knew he had made the right decision. No matter how complicated or frightening his new reality might be, it was infinitely better than the emotional emptiness that had been his life for the past 5 years. "Mr. Michael?" Ethan held his hand as they left the hospital. "Thank you for taking care of me. Thank you for letting me take care of you, champ." They walked together toward Michael's car, which was parked in front of the hospital. Ethan stopped when he saw the luxurious car, clearly impressed. "This car is yours?" "Yes, it is. Do you like it?" "It's the most beautiful car I've ever seen." Ethan hesitated. "Can I touch it?" Michael smiled. "Yes, you can. In fact, you can get in. Let's go for a ride." As he helped Ethan settle into the passenger seat and adjusted the seatbelt, Michael thought of Jacob. His first reaction was the familiar pain, but this time it came with something different. A feeling that Jacob would be happy to know his father was caring for another child who needed love and protection. It was the first time in 5 years that Michael had thought of his deceased son without feeling only pain, and that, in itself, was already a small miracle. "Where are we going now?" asked Ethan, as Michael started the car. "First, we're going to my apartment. You'll see your new room." "I'm going to have my own room." "Yes, you are." Ethan held the doll tighter. "Grace never had her own room. We always slept in the living room or kitchen of the houses where my mom worked." Michael felt another pang of anger toward Grace, but tried to keep his voice neutral. "Now both of you will have a room just for you." "And then we'll look for my mom?" Michael looked through the rearview mirror at Ethan, who was gazing out the window with wide eyes, taking in everything around him. "And then we'll look for your mom." But mentally, Michael was preparing for one of the most difficult conversations of his life. A conversation he knew would change everything for Ethan and probably for himself too. Michael's apartment was in one of the most upscale neighborhoods of New York, a modern building overlooking the park. When they entered the elevator, Ethan was fascinated by the mirrors and the sensation of going up so high. "How many floors are there?" 22. We live on the 20th. "Wow." Ethan pressed his face against the elevator glass when they reached the floor. "You can see everything from up here." The apartment was exactly as Michael had described to himself. Modern, minimalist, made for a single successful man. Dark wood floors, designer furniture, artwork on the walls, a panoramic view of the city. Ethan walked in slowly, clearly intimidated by the luxury. "It's very beautiful," he whispered. "Come on, let me show you your room." Michael took Ethan to what had been his home office. It was a spacious room with a large window and plenty of natural light. There was a desk, a bookshelf, and a reading chair. "We'll turn this room into your bedroom. You can choose the colors, the furniture, how you want to decorate it." Ethan looked around, his eyes shining. "Really?" "Yes, really. After all, it will be your room." Ethan ran to the window and looked out. "Look, Grace," he said to the doll. "We're going to live in a really high place. You can see the clouds up close." Michael watched Ethan exploring the space, making plans out loud about where to put his bed, where to hang his drawings, where the doll Grace could sleep. It was comforting to see how quickly the child was adapting, but also disturbing to realize how little he had had before. A room of his own was such a basic thing, but for Ethan, it represented an incredible novelty. "Mr. Michael," Ethan turned to him, "when my mom comes to visit us, can she sleep in my room too?" The question hit Michael like a punch in the stomach. Ethan hadn't given up on the fantasy that his mother would return. He still believed the situation was temporary. "Ethan, come here. Sit with me." They sat in the reading chair, Ethan on Michael's lap with the Emily doll clutched tightly to his chest. "Remember how I told you that sometimes people make hard choices?" Ethan nodded. "I found out where your mother is." Ethan's eyes lit up. "You did? Did she get out of the drum? Where is she?" Michael took a deep breath. "Ethan, your mother wasn't in the drum. She went to another city." "But why did she go without me? Was she looking for me?" No, Ethan. She knew where you were, and she still decided to leave. Ethan fell silent for a long moment, processing the information. Michael could see the gears turning in the child's mind, trying to reconcile this new information with the narrative he had created. But she said she loved me. She said she'd come back to get me. And I'm sure she loves you, Ethan. But sometimes, when people are very sad or very scared, they make choices that aren't the best. Is she sad? I think so. Very sad. Ethan hugged the doll tighter. And she doesn't want me to live with her anymore. Michael felt his eyes fill with tears. How do you answer a question like that for a child? I don't know, Ethan. That's why I want to talk to her, to understand what she's thinking. What if she says she doesn't want me anymore? The question was asked in such a small, vulnerable voice that Michael could barely respond. If she says that, then you stay with me. Forever. Forever? Forever. Because I want you with me, Ethan. You reminded me how good it feels to take care of someone you love. Ethan leaned against Michael's chest. I love you too, Mr. Michael. You're the nicest person I know. They stayed hugging for a long time in silence. Michael felt the weight of the responsibility he had taken on. It wasn't just about providing food, shelter, and education for Ethan. It was the responsibility of healing a broken heart, of teaching a traumatized child to trust again, of being the family Ethan had lost. But he also felt something he hadn't experienced in 5 years: purpose. Since the accident, his life had been mechanical, with no real meaning beyond financial success. Now taking care of Ethan gave each day a new meaning. Mr. Michael. Ethan lifted his head to look at him. When we go talk to my mother, will you come with me? If you want me to. I do. Because if she says she doesn't want me anymore, I'll need you so I won't be sad. Michael kissed Ethan's forehead. And if she says she wants you back? Ethan thought for a moment. Then I'll have to choose, right? The maturity of the answer surprised Michael. Ethan understood there was a choice to be made, and that this choice would be his. Yeah, you'll have to choose. Can I choose to stay with you even if she wants me to come back? Yes, you can, champ. The choice is yours. Ethan nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. Then it's okay, we can go talk to her whenever you want. At that moment, Michael made a decision. They would go to Miami the next day. It was time to confront Grace and resolve Ethan's situation once and for all. It wasn't fair for the child to keep living in uncertainty, but Michael also knew he was about to have one of the most difficult conversations of his life. And depending on how that conversation went, his life could change forever. The rest of the day was spent shopping for Ethan's room. They went to a furniture store where Ethan chose a bed with drawers underneath, a blue desk, and a wardrobe he thought was huge. Then they went to a clothing store where Michael bought several sets of clothes for Ethan, including pajamas, sneakers, and a coat for cold days. Ethan was amazed by each purchase. It was obvious he was used to having very little, so every new piece of clothing or furniture was received as an incredible gift. Is all this really mine? He asked when they were driving home with the car full of bags. All yours. And I can wear it whenever I want? Yes, you can. In fact, you'll have to wear it, especially the clothes. Michael smiled. Ethan laughed, a sound Michael was learning to cherish. It was the first time he had heard Ethan give a genuine, carefree laugh. When they got home, Michael called a furniture company to have everything set up the next day. Ethan insisted on helping choose where each thing would go, consulting the doll Grace about every decision. Grace thinks the bed should be near the window, he announced after a whispered conversation with the doll. Then near the window is where we'll put it. In the evening, while Ethan was taking a bath, a warm tub bath, another amazing novelty for him, Michael called Marcus. I need you to cancel all my appointments for a few more days, maybe a whole week. Mr. Anderson, may I ask what's going on? The shareholders are starting to ask questions. Let's just say I'm dealing with an urgent family situation. Family situation? But sir, you don't have... Now I do, Marcus. And it's my priority at the moment. After hanging up, Michael prepared the living room sofa for Ethan to sleep on that night, since the bedroom furniture would only arrive the next day. When Ethan came out of the bathroom in his new pajamas, smelling of the children's shampoo Michael had bought, he looked like a completely different child from the one he had found in the alley 3 days earlier. "Mr. Michael, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Why are you being so good to me? Isn't it because you want something in return?" The question revealed a lot about Ethan's past experiences. He had learned early that kindness often came with a price. Michael knelt down to Ethan's level. "I don't want anything in return, Ethan. I'm being good to you because you deserve to be treated well, and because taking care of you makes me happy." "It makes you happy." "Very happy. It's been a long time since I felt useful to someone. You reminded me how good it is to have someone to care for." Ethan threw himself into Michael's arms. "I never had someone who cared for me just because they wanted to. My mother cared for me because I was her son, but she always said it was very hard." Michael felt another pang of anger toward Grace. How could she have made a child feel like a burden? "Taking care of you isn't hard, Ethan. It's the easiest and most natural thing I've ever done." They stayed embraced for a few more minutes until Ethan started to yawn. "I think you're sleepy, champ." "I am, but I'm a little scared." "Scared of what?" "Of waking up and finding out this was all a dream. Of waking up and being back in the alley, alone." Michael felt his heart tighten. "It wasn't a dream, Ethan, and you'll never be alone again, I promise." "Do you really promise?" "I promise." After Ethan fell asleep on the sofa, hugging the Grace doll, Michael sat in the nearby armchair, just watching. It was amazing how that child's presence had transformed his apartment. The place that was once silent and cold now had life, purpose, love. Michael took his laptop and started researching Miami, about how to get there, where to stay. Tomorrow would be a difficult day. They would confront Grace and finally discover the whole truth about why she had abandoned Ethan. But Michael was also preparing for the possibility that Grace might change her mind and want Ethan back. And he realized, with a clarity that frightened him, that he didn't want this to happen. In just 3 days, Ethan had become an essential part of his life. The thought of losing him now was almost unbearable. But Michael knew the decision wouldn't be his. It would be Ethan's. And all he could do was ensure the child knew that, whatever he decided, he would be loved and supported. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us, who are just starting out. Now continuing. The trip to Miami the next morning was a new experience for Ethan, who had never left New York. He was glued to the car window, fascinated by the landscape gradually changing from city to countryside, and then to the coast. "Look, Grace," he whispered to the doll. "Look how many trees, and look at those mountains." Michael had decided not to tell Ethan exactly what they were going to do in Miami. He only said they were going to the beach and that they might find his mother there. He didn't want to create overly specific expectations in case things didn't go as planned. But as they approached Miami, Michael felt his anxiety growing. How would Grace react to seeing them? Was she really working at the Silverman house? And more importantly, what would she say when confronted with the reality of what her abandonment had caused Ethan? "Mr. Michael, is it true the ocean is bigger than the whole city?" "Much bigger, champ, you'll see." When they finally reached South Beach, Ethan was absolutely amazed. He had seen the ocean in pictures and on television, but never in real life. The vast blue expanse stretching to the horizon left him speechless for several minutes. It's gigantic," was all he could say. Michael booked 2 rooms in a hotel near the beach. Ethan was ecstatic about the hotel room, exploring every corner, testing the bed, admiring the ocean view from the window. "Can I go to the beach now?" "Of course, but later we have to do something important." "What?" "Remember I said your mother might be around here. We're going to look for her." Ethan's expression immediately changed, mixing expectation with nervousness. "Is she really here?" "I think so. But Ethan, before we find her, you need to understand something. Your mother might be different. She might not want to come back to New York with us." "But why? How do you explain to a 10-year-old the complexities of adult human feelings? How to talk about fear, shame, inadequacy, all the possible reasons that lead a mother to abandon her child. Sometimes adults get very confused, Ethan. They do things that don't make sense, even when they love their children very much. Ethan nodded gravely. Like when my mom yelled at me when she was nervous, but then cried and apologized. Ethan's observation revealed more about his past life than Michael wanted to know. Grace apparently had temper problems, probably related to the stress of being a single mother in a difficult financial situation. Exactly like that, only this time, it's a bigger confusion. They spent the afternoon at the beach, where Ethan had fun like Michael had never seen before. He ran on the sand, dipped his feet in the cold water, collected shells to show Grace later. Michael took several photos with his phone, wanting to preserve those moments of pure joy. It was painful and comforting at the same time to see Ethan so happy. Painful because it showed how much the child had been deprived of simple experiences, like playing at the beach. Comforting because it demonstrated his resilience and ability to find joy even after everything he had been through. "Mr. Michael, thank you for bringing me here," Ethan said as they were returning to the hotel in the late afternoon. "It was a pleasure, champ. Even if we don't find my mom, it was the best day of my life." The phrase broke Michael's heart. Ethan was emotionally preparing himself for the possibility of not finding Grace, or of finding her and discovering she didn't want to see him. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Michael left the hotel and went to look for the Silverman house. It wasn't hard to find. It was a large house in the most upscale area of South Beach, with a well-kept garden and an automatic gate. Michael parked across the street and watched. At 9 p.m., he saw a woman leave through the back door of the house. Even from a distance, and 5 years after the only photo he had seen in Ethan's medical records, he recognized Grace. She looked different, thinner, longer hair, a more tired expression. But it was definitely her. Michael watched her walk to a nearby bus stop, probably returning to where she lived. Michael had an impulse to approach her right then, but decided to wait. He wanted Ethan with him when he spoke to her. The child deserved to be present for that conversation. The next morning, Michael explained to Ethan that he had found where Grace worked. "Is she okay?" was Ethan's first question. "She seems fine, yes." "And did she ask about me?" Michael took a deep breath. "Ethan, she doesn't know we're here yet." "He doesn't know. We're going to surprise her." Ethan's eyes lit up. "A good surprise?" "I hope so, champ." They arrived at the Silverman house mid-morning. Michael rang the bell, and a middle-aged woman answered. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm looking for Grace. Does she work here?" The woman looked suspiciously at Michael and then at Ethan. "Who's asking?" "I'm Michael Anderson. This is Ethan, Grace's son." The woman's expression changed completely. "Ethan? Her son?" "Yes. But she said he was well taken care of in New York." Michael and Ethan exchanged glances. So Grace had lied to her employers too. "May I speak with her, please?" The woman hesitated. "Grace is tidying up the bedrooms. She will be very surprised to see you." Surprised was an understatement. When Grace appeared at the house door 5 minutes later, her expression went through a series of emotions. Surprise, fear, shame, and something that might have been joy, but quickly turned into panic. "Ethan," she whispered, "how did you find me?" Ethan ran to her but stopped a few feet away, as if he had suddenly become shy. "Mum, I thought you were stuck in the drum." Grace looked confused from Ethan to Michael. "What drum? What is he talking about?" Michael stepped closer. "Grace, can I speak with you privately? It's about Ethan." Grace looked nervously at her employer, who was still watching from the door. I can't leave now. I'm working. It's important. Very important." The employer approached. "Grace, take an hour off. Talk about what you need to talk about." They went to a small nearby cafe. Grace kept her distance from Ethan, who clearly didn't understand the cold reception. "Mom, I missed you," Ethan said when they sat down. Grace averted her gaze, unable to look at her son. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" Michael decided to get straight to the point. "Grace, Ethan spent 5 days living on the street after you left. Mrs. Wilkins couldn't take care of him anymore. Grace's face paled. But she promised, she tried, but she didn't have the financial means. My God. Grace covered her face with her hands. I thought he would be okay. He was malnourished and dehydrated when I found him. He had to be hospitalized. Ethan looked confused from one adult to the other. Mom, why didn't you come back to get me? I looked for you everywhere. Grace finally looked at her son, and Michael saw tears in her eyes. Ethan, I couldn't anymore. Couldn't what anymore? Asked Michael. Grace took a deep breath before answering. Take care of him. I lost my job, had no money for rent, for food. I thought it would be better for him if I wasn't in the way. In the way? Michael tried to keep his voice calm, but it was getting difficult. You don't understand. I'm a terrible mother. I always have been. I yell at him when I'm upset. I can't give him the things he deserves. He deserves someone better than me. Ethan was listening to everything in silence, trying to process what his mother was saying. Mom, he said finally, I don't want someone better than you. I just want you. Grace started crying for real now. Ethan, you don't understand. I messed everything up. I always mess everything up. Michael leaned forward. Grace, running away doesn't solve anything. Ethan needs you. No, he doesn't. Look at him. He's better cared for now than he ever was with me. New clothes, well fed. You can give him everything I never could. But he doesn't want things, Grace. He wants his mother. Grace shook her head violently. No, I don't want him back. I can't take care of him. I know I can't. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan was looking at his mother with an expression Michael had never seen before, a mixture of pain, confusion, and something that might have been understanding beyond his years. Mom, Ethan said slowly. Don't you love me anymore? Grace sobbed. I love you more than anything in the world, Ethan. That's why I can't stay with you, because I'll only hurt you. But you're already hurting me by leaving. The simplicity and truth of Ethan's statement left everyone silent. Michael knew he was witnessing a moment that would change Ethan's life forever. The child was finally understanding that his mother had chosen to abandon him, not out of malice, but out of a mixture of fear, inadequacy, and misdirected love. Ethan, said Grace, trying to control her tears, Mr. Anderson can take care of you much better than I can. He can give you an education, a nice house, a better future. But I want a future with you too. Grace looked at Michael. Please take good care of him. He's the most precious thing I have in life. If he's the most precious thing, why are you giving up on him? Asked Michael, unable to hide his irritation. Because I love him enough to want him to have a better life than I can provide. Michael was about to respond when Ethan stood up from his chair. Mom, can I give you a hug? Grace nodded, and Ethan approached her. They hugged for a long moment, both crying. I'll miss you every day, whispered Grace. I'll miss you too. When they separated, Ethan looked at his mother with a maturity that broke Michael's heart. Mom, if you don't want to take care of me, I understand. But I want you to know that I'll always love you. Grace covered her mouth to muffle a sob. I'll always love you too, my son. Always. Ethan turned to Michael. Mr. Anderson, can we go now? I want to go home. Michael nodded, getting up from the table. Grace walked them to the exit of the cafe. Michael, she said when they were at the door, thank you for taking care of him, and for letting me explain. Grace, are you sure about this decision? Because once we leave here, it might be very hard to go back. I'm sure. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but I'm sure it's the right thing for him. Michael nodded. Then I'll start the adoption processes. Adoption? Grace looked surprised. Ethan isn't going to any shelter. He's staying with me. Forever, if he wants to. Grace looked at Ethan, who was holding Michael's hand. Do you want to stay with Mr. Michael, Ethan? Ethan nodded. Yes, I do. He makes me feel safe. Then I'll sign any paper needed, said Grace. Just promise you'll tell him I love him. Whenever he asks, promise you'll tell him. I promise. Grace knelt down to Ethan's level. "My son, you're going to be very happy with Mr. Michael. He's a good man. What about you, Mom? Will you be happy?" Grace smiled through her tears. "I'll try to be. Knowing you're okay will make it easier to try to be happy." They said their goodbyes right there at the cafe door. Ethan waved to his mother as they walked back to the car, and Grace stood on the sidewalk until they disappeared from view. During the trip back to New York, Ethan stayed quiet for a long time, looking out the window. Michael respected his silence, understanding that the child needed to process everything that had happened. It was only when they were already entering the city that Ethan finally spoke. "Mr. Michael?" "Yes, champ." "My mom isn't bad, is she? She's just confused." Michael felt his heart tighten. Even after being rejected, Ethan still defended his mother. "No, Ethan, she's not bad. She's very confused and very sad, but she loves you very much." "I know. I saw it in her eyes." Ethan paused. "Mr. Michael, can I keep calling the doll Grace? To remember my mom?" "Of course you can." "And can you be my dad now? For real?" Michael had to blink several times to hold back tears. "If you want me to be." "I really want that." "Then I am. From now on you can call me Dad if you want." Ethan smiled, the first smile since the meeting with Grace. "Dad Michael. I liked hearing that, son." The word son sounded strange and familiar at the same time in Michael's mouth. Strange because he hadn't used it in 5 years, familiar because it seemed the most natural thing in the world to call Ethan that. When they got home, the apartment had been transformed. The furniture for Ethan's room had been delivered and assembled according to his specifications. The boy ran to see his new room, now fully furnished and ready. "Dad Michael, it's perfect," he exclaimed, throwing himself on the new bed. Michael watched Ethan exploring his space, arranging his few belongings in the new furniture, placing the Grace doll in a place of honor on the shelf. In that moment, Michael knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right decision. Ethan was his son now, not by biology, but by choice, by love, by a connection that had been born the moment he heard those desperate screams coming from the alley, and for the first time since the accident, Michael felt complete again. Not in the same way as before, it would never be the same thing, but in a new, different way that honored both the memory of Jacob and the future with Ethan. "Dad Michael," Ethan said that night when Michael was tucking him into his new bed. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for letting me save you, son, and for saving me too." "How did I save you?" Michael smiled, kissing Ethan's forehead. "You reminded me how good it feels to love someone." Ethan settled into bed, hugging the Grace doll. "Dad Michael?" "Yes? Can we be a real family? You, me, and Grace?" "We are a real family, Ethan. Starting today." And that night, for the first time in 5 years, Michael slept with a peaceful heart, knowing that in the next room was a child who called him Dad and depended on him for everything. It was a scary and comforting responsibility at the same time. But Michael knew he was ready for it. He was finally ready to love again. The months that followed were about adaptation and discoveries for both of them. Michael learned to balance work and fatherhood, something he had forgotten how to do. He hired a kind babysitter named Mrs. Louise to stay with Ethan when he had meetings he couldn't cancel, but he always made sure to get home in time for dinner. Ethan flourished in the stable and loving environment. He started attending a private school near the apartment, where he quickly stood out for his intelligence and creativity. His drawings became more elaborate and colorful, reflecting his newfound happiness. The apartment was completely transformed. The once bare walls were now covered with Ethan's drawings. The formal dining table gave way to a smaller, cozier one. The silence that used to dominate the home was replaced by conversations, laughter, and even occasional arguments about homework. Michael discovered that being Ethan's father was different from having been Jacob's father, but no less rewarding. Jacob had been born into his life, growing up with him from the start. Ethan arrived already formed, with his own personality and history, and the challenge was to connect with that unique personality. And Ethan, in turn, learned to trust again. At first, he constantly tested Michael. He disobeyed small rules just to see if he would be abandoned again, repeatedly asked if Michael still wanted him to stay, hid food under the bed, for fear there wouldn't be any the next day. But gradually, as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Ethan began to believe his new life was permanent. He stopped hiding food, started making plans for the future, and most importantly, began calling Michael Dad naturally without hesitation. The Grace doll remained his constant companion, but now his conversations with her were less about sadness and more about the good things happening in his life. Michael often heard Ethan telling the doll about his days at school, about the drawings he had made, about the books Michael read to him before bed. One day, 6 months after the official adoption, Ethan asked a question Michael had been expecting. "Dad, do you think my mom is okay?" They were at the park near the apartment, Ethan playing on the swing while Michael pushed him. "I hope so, son. Why do you ask?" "Sometimes I dream about her. In the dream, she's sad." Michael stopped pushing the swing. "Do you want to try talking to her?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Do you think she wants to talk to me?" "I don't know, Ethan, but if you want to try, we can see if we can get her phone number." "I think so, just to know if she's okay." Michael had anticipated this moment and had already gotten Grace's number through Mary, his friend. That night, after dinner, they called. Grace answered on the third ring, and Michael could hear the surprise in her voice when he identified himself. "Michael, is something wrong with Ethan?" "No, he's fine. Actually, he wanted to talk to you." There was silence on the other end of the line. "He wants to talk to me?" "Yes, he does. May he?" Of course he may." Michael passed the phone to Ethan, who suddenly became shy. "Hello, Mom?" "Hi, my son. How are you?" "I'm good. I'm in school now, and I learned to swim, and I have my own room." Michael could hear Grace crying on the other end of the line. "That's great, Ethan. I'm so happy to hear you're doing well." "And you, Mom? Are you okay?" "Yes, son. I'm working. I have a place to live. I'm fine." They talked for a few more minutes, Ethan telling her about his new life and Grace asking questions about school and friends. When Ethan passed the phone back to Michael, he was smiling. "Michael," said Grace, "thank you for letting him call and for giving him everything I couldn't. Grace, Ethan will always be your son too. If you'd like to stay in touch with him, I do, very much, but only if you think it's good for him. I think it's great for him. A child needs to know they're loved even when things don't work out as expected." From that day on, Ethan and Grace started talking once a week. Grace never asked to see him in person, and Ethan never asked if he could visit her. Both seemed comfortable with the distance and limited contact. Michael was impressed by Ethan's emotional maturity. The boy had found a way to maintain love for his mother without feeding fantasies about reconciliation. He understood that some situations simply don't have perfect solutions. 1 year after Ethan came into his life, Michael was in his office when he received an unexpected call. It was from Ethan's school. "Mr. Anderson, this is Teacher Marina. I need to speak with you about Ethan." Michael felt his heart race. "Did he do something?" "No, nothing serious. Actually, it's something very special. Ethan won a state drawing competition. His artwork was selected from thousands of entries." Michael felt such an intense wave of pride that he had to sit down. "Really? What was the drawing?" "It was a drawing of a family. Very beautiful and expressive. The award ceremony is tomorrow, and we wanted to know if you can come." "Of course I can. I'm so proud of him." When Michael got home that day, Ethan was in the living room doing homework, with the Emily doll sitting on the table beside him. "Ethan, I heard you won an award." Ethan looked up from his notebook, smiling shyly. "The teacher already told you?" "She did. I'm so proud of you, son." Ethan ran into Michael's arms. "Dad, will you come to the ceremony with me?" "I wouldn't miss it for the world." That night, Ethan showed Michael the winning drawing. It was a depiction of a family, a tall man, a small child, and a more ethereal female figure, less defined. "Who are these people in the drawing?" asked Michael. "It's the three of us, you, me, and my mum." Michael looked more closely. The mother figure was drawn differently. more transparent, as if present but not physically. "It's very beautiful, Ethan. Very creative." The teacher said the drawing shows that families can have different forms, that not everyone needs to live together to be family. Ethan's wisdom continued to surprise Michael. At 11 years old, the boy had reached an understanding about family that many adults take decades to achieve. At the award ceremony, Michael watched with tears in his eyes as Ethan received the trophy on stage. The boy held the prize with both hands, beaming, and searched for Michael in the audience. When their eyes met, Ethan waved, and Michael waved back, feeling his heart overflow with love and pride. After the ceremony, as they walked to the car, Ethan made an observation that stayed etched in Michael's memory. "Dad, do you think broken people can be fixed?" "What do you mean by broken people?" "Like I was broken when you found me, and like you were broken too." Michael stopped walking and looked at Ethan. "How do you know I was broken?" "Because your house was very sad before I came, and because sometimes you'd stare into space with a face like you were remembering bad things." Michael knelt down to Ethan's level. "And do you think we got fixed?" Ethan thought carefully before answering. "I think we fixed each other. Like when you glue two broken pieces together, they become stronger at the glued spot than they were before." Michael hugged Ethan right there on the sidewalk, not caring about the people passing by. "You're right, son. We fixed each other together. And now we're a real family. Now we're a real family." That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Michael went to the home office, now transformed into a study room where he and Ethan did homework together, and took out a photo he kept in the drawer. It was a picture of his first family, him, Emily, and Jacob, taken during the last Christmas they spent together. For 5 years, Michael had kept that photo as if it were a wound that needed to stay open. Looking at it was a way to punish himself, to not allow himself to move on. But now, looking at the photo, Michael felt something different. It wasn't pure pain anymore, but a mix of longing, gratitude, and peace. Jacob and Emily would always be part of who he was. But Ethan was now part of it too, and this new family didn't diminish the love for the previous one. Michael put the photo in a frame and placed it on the living room shelf, next to a recent picture of him and Ethan at Miami Beach. Two families, two kinds of love, two ways of being happy. The next day during breakfast, Ethan noticed the photo on the shelf. "Dad, who are these people?" Michael took a deep breath. It was the first time Ethan had asked about his previous family. "They're people I loved very much before I met you, my wife Emily and my son Jacob." "What happened to them?" "They had an accident and went to heaven." Ethan thought for a moment, chewing his cereal. "Is that why you were sad when you found me?" "That's why I was sad, yes." "And now you're not sad anymore?" Michael smiled. "Sometimes I still get sad when I remember them, but it's not a sadness that hurts. It's a good kind of longing for people who were important to me. Like how I miss my mum. Exactly like how you miss your mum." Ethan nodded, seeming satisfied with the explanation. "Dad?" "Yes?" "Do you think they'd be happy to know you have a new family now?" The question took Michael by surprise. He had never thought about it that way. "You know what, Ethan? I think so. I think they'd be very happy to know I found you, and that we found each other." "So, everyone is happy in the end?" Michael laughed. "Yes, son. Everyone is happy in the end." The years that followed were full of small daily miracles. Ethan excelled in school, both academically and socially. His artistic talents flourished, and he began participating in local exhibitions. Michael rearranged his professional life to be more present, discovering that being a present father was much more rewarding than just being a successful businessman. They developed their own traditions. Every Friday was movie night, where they took turns choosing what to watch. Every Saturday morning they had coffee at the corner bakery and talked about their weekend plans. Every Sunday afternoon, Ethan called Grace, and Michael always stayed nearby for emotional support if needed. Grace, in turn, had managed to stabilize herself in Miami. She got a better job at a cleaning company, rented a small apartment, and seemed to be gradually healing from the wounds that led her to abandon Ethan. In the weekly calls, Michael could tell she was stronger, more centered. One day, 2 years after the adoption, Grace asked a question that surprised everyone. "Michael, I'd like to visit Ethan, just for a weekend. Do you think it would be good for him?" Michael talked to Ethan about the possibility, and to his surprise, the boy was excited about the idea. "Can she come here to our house?" "Yes, she can, if you want. I want to get to know my mom better. Now that I'm older, maybe I'll understand things better." The visit was scheduled for a weekend in late fall. Grace arrived on Saturday morning, clearly nervous but determined. Ethan greeted her with a warm hug, but Michael noticed a certain formality in the encounter, as if they were distant relatives reuniting. Over the weekend, Michael observed the interaction between mother and son with interest. Ethan showed Grace his room, his drawings, his achievements at school. Grace listened to everything with attention and genuine pride, but there was an emotional distance that hadn't been there before. "You've grown so much, Ethan," she said on Sunday during lunch. "And you're so mature." "It's because Father Michael teaches me many things," Ethan replied naturally. Michael noticed how Ethan referred to him as Father Michael in front of Grace, a respectful way to keep the hierarchies clear. "Is he being a wonderful father to you?" "Yes, he is. He takes care of me, helps me with homework, takes me for walks, and he never yells at me even when I do something wrong." Grace looked at Michael with gratitude. "Thank you," she said simply. When it was time to say goodbye on Sunday afternoon, Ethan hugged his mother affectionately, but without the desperation Michael had expected. "Mom, thank you for coming to visit me." "Thank you for having me, my son. You're an amazing boy. Can you come again?" "If you want me to." "I do. But you don't have to come all the time. Only when you feel like it." The maturity of the response impressed both Michael and Grace. Ethan had found a balance between maintaining the bond with his mother and not depending on her emotionally. After Grace left, Michael asked Ethan how he was feeling. "It was good to see her. She seems happier now." "And you? Were you sad that she left?" Ethan shook his head. "I wasn't sad. I know she'll be fine there in Miami, and I'll be fine here with you." That night, as Michael was putting Ethan to bed, the boy made an observation that perfectly summed up his entire journey. "Father Michael, you know what I think happened." "What?" "I think when you found me screaming in the alley, we were saving each other, only neither of us knew it." Michael smiled. "I think you're right, son. And now we're where we're supposed to be. We are where we should be." Ethan settled into bed, hugging the Grace doll, which was now more worn but still his faithful companion. "Father Michael?" "Yes?" "I love you." "I love you too, Ethan. Very much." And that night, Michael fell asleep, knowing he had found his place in the world again. It wasn't the same place he had lost 5 years earlier, but it was an equally valuable and love-filled place. The last thing Michael thought before sleeping was of the rusty drum in the alley behind his office. That drum, which Ethan had imagined held his mother, had in a way become a symbol of transformation. Just as the drum was empty when they opened it but contained the possibility of a new life, Michael's heart was seemingly empty after his loss, but held the possibility of a new kind of love. And Ethan, screaming desperately for help in that alley, didn't know he was about to save not only himself, but also a man who had gotten lost in his own pain. Some encounters change the course of our lives irreversibly. A child's cry can echo in the heart of a wounded adult and awaken a capacity for love that seemed to have been lost forever. And sometimes, when we're ready to start over, we discover that love doesn't diminish when it's shared. It multiplies, creating a family that didn't exist before, but always should have. End of story. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this journey of Michael and Ethan? Do you believe that love can truly heal broken hearts and create new families? Share in the comments which moment of the story moved you the most, and if you know any real-life story similar to this one. Your opinion is very important to us. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this.